Hello, I'm Annie Larkin, Vice President and Director of Community Engagement of the Amerind Museum. Welcome to Contemporary Native Warriors with Warren Queton. Before we begin the program today, I want to acknowledge that Amerind is located in southeastern Arizona on lands where O'odham, Hopi, Oshwe, Yoeme, and Apache families have lived for untold generations, and whose wisdom and traditions live on today in vibrant communities. We are grateful for what all of these communities, rich in history, have to teach us. Thank you to our program sponsor, Desert Diamond Casinos, as well as our members and donors who enable Amerind to provide free online programming and fulfill Amerind's mission to foster and promote the knowledge and understanding of the Native peoples of the Americas through research, education, conservation, and community engagement. To learn how you can assist Amerind in supporting its mission and programs by becoming a member or donor, please visit amerind.org. On Saturday, November 5th at 11 a.m., Amerind and Border Community Alliance will host the free online documentary film viewing and Q&A panel discussion of Pilgrimage to Magdalena. Please visit the events section of Amerind's Facebook page or website, amerind.org, for registration details. On Saturday, December 10th at 11 a.m., Amerind will host the free online lecture, Mom, You'll Be Home by Summer, a Dene story of cancer, death, grief, and hope, with Jennifer Nez Dennetdale. Please visit the events section of Amerind's Facebook page or website, amerind.org, for registration details. I would now like to introduce today's guest. Warren Queton is a Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma citizen and descendant of the Cherokee and Seminole nations. Warren is a military veteran and an active member of the Oklahoma Army National Guard and currently holds the rank of major. He has completed 3 tours overseas, serving in Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Operation Spartan Shield. From 2015 to 2016, he worked full-time for the Oklahoma Army National Guard as the State Food Program Manager. In addition to his military service, Warren is currently an adjunct instructor in the Department of Native American Studies at the University of Oklahoma, where he teaches tribal service learning and tribal governance. He is also the District 7 legislator for the Kiowa tribe and represents all Kiowa tribal citizens living outside the former reservation area. And if you would like to ask any questions during the program today, please type your question in the Q&A chat box, and we'll gather those to share with Warren after his lecture. And also a link to today's program will be sent to all of our Zoom registrants later today via email. And with that, I want to welcome you, Warren. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yep. Hey, good morning, Annie, and thank you to the Amerind Museum for having me on today. My name is Warren Queton, and I just want to say Honde Onde Batsan. I'm glad you're all here to talk with me today, a dialogue on contemporary Native warriors. Pull up my presentation here. As Annie introduced me, I'm a Kiowa, Seminole, and Cherokee, originally from Fort Worth, Texas, and I came to back to Oklahoma in 1999. I currently am a major in the Oklahoma National Guard and just recently finished my intermediate leadership education, which should make me promotable to Lieutenant Colonel. I hope to attain that rank soon. I'm a proud member of the Kiowa Black Leggings Warrior Society, which will be a key point of our discussion today, an elite war society that still exists within our Kiowa community. Currently, I serve as our District 7 legislator within our new government that our Kiowa tribe has adopted. I serve all the citizens that live outside our reservation, which is in Southwest Oklahoma. November's coming up. It is National American Indian Heritage Month. So I thought it'd be appropriate to show some images of myself and celebrating, joining the nation to celebrate our rich and diverse culture and traditions and histories as American Indians and Alaskan Natives. This is my grandfather's headdress. He was a World War II veteran with the 511th Parachute Infantry. I wear it to remember him, and within many of our communities, we have objects like these that really are significant symbols to our Native warriors, our veterans that have served our nation and served our tribes and our sovereign Native nations. And so I wear this on special occasions. It's not something I wear all the time. For our Kiowa people, this would be called, we don't call it a war bonnet or headdress, so it's a very special symbol to our people that we only bring out when we are honoring somebody. And so I took this picture, and I always tell people about, what this headdress means to me. It's a symbol of my grandfather and my service now. I've been overseas 3 times, and I came back, and I always think about the prayers that were said for him and me as we did our duty, World War II, and then me in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so people always want to see a war bonnet. It's a plain symbol, and they think it's something that's beautiful and really significant, representation of our Plains culture. Yes, it is. But for me, it's like wearing a medal. I compare it to wearing, a medal you might win, or earn. You're earning those medals. You earn this through your service. And a lot of our traditional people believe this is a high honor, something akin to a Medal of Honor or Silver Star, Bronze Star. And I think it's important that we recognize these are not things to be trivialized, but to be shared with ceremonial purpose. And so I try to carry that on and teach people in American Indian Heritage Month that these aren't things to wear at a football game or as a mascot. And so we're continuing to have these conversations and teach people and encourage people to support our thoughts on our Native warriors. So this is a man's headdress. It is a symbol of one's service to their nation. So the theme and presentation of this is contemporary Native warriors. In this presentation, we'll describe our federally recognized tribes and highlight some of our contemporary warriors: Joe Medicine Crow, Kiowa Blackleggins, and then Colonel Nicole Mann as well, and some of their achievements that they have attained. I'm very proud to be a contemporary Native warrior. And, we'll start this conversation off today with thinking about my own tribe as a Gawaigu. Kiowa people, we're a nomadic, warlike tribe on the plains. We were never together as one nation, like you see Chickasaw, Cherokee, Choctaw, large tribes. Everybody's on one reservation. We were set up into many bands, under the war chief system. Each band was under the leadership of a war chief. And so those warriors followed that lead, and they were a member of a society. We'll talk about that, the different societies later on in this presentation. But thinking back to our older ways of defending our nations, that was a way of life. It was a way of life for men and women to be warriors and defend their land, their family, their way of life. And for a lot of our Native nations, that is why we hold our veterans in such high regard, because we no longer have the traditional or older ways of going to war. And so for our contemporary Native warriors, our veterans now, a lot of that has been attained by service in the United States Armed Forces, the Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, and the Air Force. I'm very proud of all of our veterans and the sacrifice that them and their families have made. I want to acknowledge, take that opportunity to acknowledge I have a wife. Her name is Walena Fields Queton. She's from the Osage, Cherokee, and Creek Nations. And I think a lot about her sacrifice, and she has been married to me for 7 years now, and we have had one deployment, and it was very, very tough on her. So I want to acknowledge that our families, especially our spouses, our wives and husbands, they sacrifice right along with us as contemporary warriors. And I think that has happened for, generations, thinking back to our older societies. Families were born into a society and became a part of that band and had to defend their way of life, their families, their people. And a warrior doesn't do it by themselves. They are always a member of a family, and they have to have that support. And I was thinking about, this presentation today. I think it's very important. We think about those societies that were once here. They, even the warriors, they had we call them a battle buddy in today's armed services. You have a war partner, somebody to watch your back. And thinking about our older societies, we had those a long, long time ago, and we still have them today. But when your war partner might get killed in battle or something happened to them, you always took care of their family. And I think that's pretty significant, thinking about the sacrifice we make as warriors, and we still do that today. So I want to acknowledge some of our warriors, and I pulled up Joe Medicine Crow's story and Colonel Mann's story to kind of highlight some of our contemporary Native warriors in today's presentation. So we'll jump right into that, and then I'd like to have some good conversation about our Kiowa Black Legged Society, because that's a society I'm a member of, and I'm very proud. So sovereignty, the right of a nation to be self-governing. It's a fundamental concept, and I just want to encourage everybody to continue to do what you can to advocate for the retention of our Native sovereignty as tribal governments, as tribal nations, because right now in the Supreme Court, there's a lot of questioning about the status of Native nations in the future. When it comes to Castro, what is going to happen with our Native nations. And it really concerns me as a legislator for our Kiowa tribe, a very small tribe of about 11,000 American Indians. But, I think we talk about American Indians and Alaskan Natives as U.S. citizens first, but they were originally, a part of their tribe or village. And today we still have 574 recognized tribes. What's important to me about, recognizing the sovereignty of our tribes and our Native nations, we think about our Native warriors, how far back they have helped the United States armed forces in whatever conflict. A lot of times they would help and volunteer to help the United States Armed Services even before they were citizens of the United States. And I'm talking about World War I. For our Kiowa people, we had tribal members who fought in World War I, and they were not even citizens of the United States until 1924 officially. I think that's pretty amazing for our Native warriors, thinking about their service. And I can't imagine what it must feel like, for that time, from the reservation period to the boarding school period, this conversion to Christianity within the reservation. There's a lot to be said about a people who will stand up and defend a flag that once sought to annihilate them from this planet, their tribal nations. Yet our contemporary, our warriors did that. Our servicemen and women, they stepped up and they fought for a flag that wanted to place them on reservations and forget their language and forget their way of life. Yet, World War I, they did that. I had relatives who served in World War I, and they went off and they came back. And I'm proud of that. I'm really, really proud of that. But thinking about, the sovereignty of our tribes, I encourage everybody on this Zoom meeting to support our efforts to defend our native rights. And because as American Indians, we support the sovereignty of the United States, but it should be a two-way street. And I just wanted to say that here in my presentation because it's really prevalent on my mind these days. So going right into, I want to highlight a veteran today, Joe Medicine Crow. You've probably heard of him. He was born in 1913 on the Crow Indian Reservation in Montana. He was raised by his elders in his warrior tradition, and he learned to master his fears, ride bareback track game, and withstand cold. He also studied those who had previously distinguished themselves in battle, and he became the first member of the Crow Nation to earn a master's degree and left his PhD program to volunteer for service in World War II. And that's amazing. He was almost, he was in a PhD program thinking about pre-World War II, how significant that was for an American Indian to attain that level of education, but put it all aside, and volunteer for service and serve overseas. For our Kiowa people, and why I chose to highlight Joe Medicine Crow is we have a rich tradition, just like the Crow Nation does. And our Kiowa and our Crow people, we acknowledge each other as brothers. And so we remember our old ways, and we actually have our Crow Nation comes down every November to our Kiowa tribe in Southwest Oklahoma. And we have a rich tradition of playing hand game against one another. And that is a relationship that is carried on for a long time, longer than we can remember, because our Kiowa people once lived in the Yellowstone Mountain and moved east towards the Black Hills. Somewhere along the way, we befriended our Crow brothers, and we had a lot of exchange of horses and tradition. And one of the things that we were gifted from them was the sun dance and our horses, and really it changed our way of life when you think about it, because our Kiowa people might have stayed in Montana had we not become horse people and adapted to horse culture, probably taught to us through the Crow Nation. But Joe Medicine Crow here, he was raised in that warrior tradition, and it's going to come back and relate to how I was raised and the things that I was taught, because that warrior tradition is something that you are taught from a very young age. And I think it's prevalent here in the Crow Nation, talking about how he learned to do all these things. And it's just like it relates to my own upbringing of our Kiowa people, my grandparents, older people than them, talking about this distinguished warriors from within our tribe, and how proud they were to be descendants, or not descendants, but family members, to be family members of people who were great warriors in the tribe. And so I just wanted to highlight this story, a little bit of background on Joe Medicine Crow here, to highlight a truly distinguished warrior from the Crow Nation. And Mr. Medicine Crow joined the Army and became a scout in the 103rd Infantry Division, and he credits his grandfathers for giving him the strength to be a warrior. Before each battle, he would paint red stripes on his arms and carry a sacred eagle feather from a Sundance man to shield him from harm. During his European wartime service, he completed each essential task required to designate him a Crow war chief, thus becoming the last Crow Indian to earn the title. And in 1948, he earned the Bronze Star and the prestigious French Legion of Honor for his services. For our, this is a really great example of the traditional upbringing and the things that we bring with us when we go on a war journey. Him, marking stripes on his arms and carrying an eagle feather. Tribes have different ways they take care of their warriors as protection for them. And just like this, Mr. Medicine Crow here, I had, for our Kiowa people, they prayed for me before I went overseas each time. And for us, we no longer have a sun dance, just as he was granted a sacred eagle feather from a Sundance man. We no longer have our sun dance. That was put down, and I think the last one was recorded 1890 for our Kiowa people. But we do have our Native American church, our peyote religion, which is it's really taken off across North America. For our Kiowa people, we got it from the Comanches down here in Texas and brought it back. And so we hold that near and dear to our heart as a contemporary religion. And so when I became enlisted in the United States Army, my first year I had to deploy to Iraq. And my uncles from the Imhula Kozad family said, well, we need to have a peyote meeting for you. And we want to say some prayers so you'll come back in a good way. And so we did that. And those prayers, I went to Iraq. I felt really strong, just like he's talking about. My uncles and my grandfathers, they gave me strength to go on my war journey through their prayers. And when I left and I went to Iraq, and I thought I was going to be in sand and, hot, which it was. But then something happened one day. My first sergeant came in my barracks and instructed me to get my things together, that I was going to be deploying to another location to fulfill an obligation for the unit. They had to send a person to this place called Camp Victory, Iraq. And they knew I had a degree. And this was in 2007. I had already graduated my bachelor's degree, and they knew that I was educated and can work on a computer, and that's all they needed. So they said, we're going to send you. And so I went, and my first sergeant, he drove me over there in a Humvee, and we pulled up to this, it was called the Al-Fal Palace in Iraq. And it was on, you don't think of Iraq having, lakes and rivers, but it was right on the Tigris River, and it had a huge lake around it. And this palace was built in the middle of a lake. And I remember getting out of that Humvee, and my first sergeant throwing out my duffels and said, go through this gate. You're supposed to report to this sergeant, and they'll square you away on where to live. And, you're billeting. And I guess he kind of shook my hand and kind of let me go on my way with my orders. And about that time, I looked at that palace, and I saw the palm trees and the lake. And it hit me that was the answer to my uncle's, my grandfather's prayers, that they wanted me to be safe. They wanted me to have, go do what I got to do in Iraq. And I did, because I had a hard job there. I won't go into any details of that, but it was good though, because it kind of led me down a path that has made me successful in the military. And I'm really, really proud to be a contemporary warrior to this day. But that's something that they sent over there with me, was those prayers, and they gave me a chief peyote, and I put that in my uniform to take care of me and protection. And my uncle, I'll kind of talk more about that here later on, but really, really proud of, those prayers they sent with me, and they brought me back in a good way. So here's Mr. Medicine Crow. He served the Crow Nation as tribal historian for more than 50 years. He wrote extensively about Indian history and culture, as well as gathered numerous oral histories from older generations, and his efforts preserved a large section of Crow history and stories that otherwise might have been lost. So in 2009, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest honor. So I just want to thank, I want to remember him, Joe Medicine Crow, for his sacrifice and the things that he achieved in his life. And to me, he's a role model. He's a role model for me to kind of follow and kind of mimic or imitate, and not imitate, but I want him to be my role model. So I accept it, and I want to be the same type of a warrior, a contemporary warrior that he is. I also like to highlight Colonel Nicole Aunapu Mann, U.S. Marine Corps pilot. Nicole Mann has become the first American Indian woman to go to space as part of NASA's new crew on the International Space Station. So she is a Wailaki tribal member from the Round Valley Indian tribes in Northern California. And so her quote here, I feel very proud. It's important that we celebrate our diversity and really communicate that specifically to our younger generation. So she's just like me, still serving our country, serving our own tribal communities as well. And, part of why I wanted to include her is, she's a very outstanding role model for our, even our women warriors sometimes are left out of these conversations. I know that's like that in different communities. A lot of people, when they think of a warrior, they only think of a man. Well, women serve right along next to us nowadays. And I think it's important that we acknowledge their service too. And she's a very accomplished young lady, and I'm very proud of her service. And in our Kiowa tradition, we have women warriors that I call my sisters in arms, and they serve right along with us. And even our ceremonies, they're there to support us. So I appreciate their service as well. Colonel Mann, she got a bachelor in mechanical engineering and a master's in mechanical engineering. She's currently a Marine Corps colonel and served as a test pilot in the FA-18 Hornet and Super Hornet. So she's been deployed twice on aircraft carriers in support of combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. So just want to thank her for her service. So me, I grew up, like I said, from Fort Worth, Texas. And for whatever reason, I was always around my grandparents, my grandfather and my grandmother, and they always were around their generation. And we might be visiting, eating, but I would always go to Oklahoma in the summers and in the fall. And my grandparents were an integral part of my life. And I think about them daily because of the things they taught me. And I was around a lot of older people back then. And I don't know why, but I enjoyed being around them, and I enjoyed listening to them and their stories. And they'd tell me to go play, you need to go over here. These is where the young people are at. And sometimes I just wanted to hear them talk and visit and talk our language and sing our songs. And, I enjoyed being around my grandfather when he was alive. He was, I guess how you'd say, he was my teacher, my best friend about how to live my life. And they made sure I knew who I was in my identity, being able to speak my language and carry on our traditions. But I grew up in the first society of our Kiowa Warrior Society, which is called Yapahega. It's our warrior structure and our way of life from an old tradition, ancient tradition of our Kiowa people, Goy Gubada. And so at Rabbit Society, we say Polai is a rabbit, or Polayo for rabbits. And Rabbit Society was the first, it was a beginning. It was a beginning of that warrior lifestyle. And it used to be just comprised of young boys. Nowadays, we've included young girls, and it was a society for children. They had their own camps, their own horses, but it was a way to start their worldview of how they're going to live their life as a Kiowa. And they had their own songs and their own dance, and it is they learned how to be warriors, shooting a bow and arrow, taking care of a horse, tracking game, just like Joe Medicine Crow was taught when he was growing up. That society still exists today, and I'll show you some pictures here in a little bit. But the Rabbit Society was the beginning of that warrior lifestyle. That's where you learned how to be a young warrior. And I like this picture here on the right. You see a young Kiowa man that he was a rabbit at this time, and that was the way they dress and the way they, you can see his adornments. He's got some really nice regalia on, and that's the way we think of our children. We don't just put them out there in anything. We want them to dress their best for this Polayope, this dance that we have, and it still goes on today. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. That's something that we still have within our Kiowa community. Once that Kiowa or that rabbit, that Polai reached the age of about 12, 13 years old, they were advanced into different societies. The young teenager societies, one of them was called the Altoi, the Young Sheep or Mountain Sheep Society. It was kind of for younger men. Once a person grew out of that children's stage, they would advance up into Altoi, the Mountain Sheep Society, or the Seitan. Seitan is like a horse headdress society. And we still have, we don't have those societies anymore, but we have some of their songs that have progressed into other societies that we still have. I wish that we had some of these younger societies. Maybe it might help our young people, think about ways to kind of live their life in a good way, and maybe even help our community with issues of mental health or alcohol and drug addiction in our communities. But just a thought that I had, I wish we still had these societies today in contemporary times. The fourth society is the Taempega, the Kiowa Gourd clan. We still have that, and there's a large active member list that take care of that ceremony. Taempega is our Gourd society. They were a warrior society that you advanced to once you got past your teenage years. And so Taempega, they were the Kiowa aristocrats. And we have, just like a military branch, when I say branch of the Army, you have different branches. You have infantry, you have transportation, you have armored, you have cavalry, these different branches. They're all specialized in something. So Taempega, they were our Kiowa aristocrats, kind of like they kept order within the tribe, kind of like military police almost. But they had a code which they lived by, and they had their own songs. And when they had their ceremonies to celebrate, they'd always use their gourd to bring people together and celebrate the members of that society. The fifth society was the Ohoma, the War Dance Society. And both the Kiowa Gourd clan and the Ohoma and the next one, the Kiowa Black Leggins, they are all still functioning today, those adult societies. Ohoma, or War Dance Society, it's a corruption of the word Umaha for the Omaha people. Umaha. Kiowas, they corrupted that and said Ohoma. And so they have a War Dance Society that still goes on to this day in Stecker, Oklahoma. They have both the Kiowa Gourd clan and the Ohoma Society. They have their ceremonies once a year in the summer. Kiowa Gourd clan, they host theirs that 4th of July weekend, and then Ohoma dances later on in July. And then our sixth is the Tokongo, which is my society. That's the one I'm currently an active member of and a proud member of it. Kiowa Black Leggings. They are an elite warrior society that still carries on an ancient warrior tradition, of how to be a warrior. And our code right now is focused on our red cape. We wear a red cape. We carry a lance, and we have traditional ceremonies that go on every year, the second weekend of October, right around Indigenous Peoples Day. We have an encampment down at Indian City, USA, in Anadarko, Oklahoma, just about 2 miles south. The tribe bought 200 acres of Indian City, and that's where we hold our ceremonies in our encampment. And we have some really, really strong, powerful songs that we like to sing and dance to, and it's a very, very uplifting spiritual ceremony that the Tokongo has each October. And it brings the tribe together to celebrate the service of our veterans and contemporary warriors that we have. And we had a seventh, Goy Tsanko, the top 10 warriors of the Kiowa tribe. They used to have the top 10 warriors would all dress in yellow. That was their code. And they were akin to, like you read about these dog soldiers. They were people that had done a lot of deeds and were not to be reckoned with when you think about our warrior lifestyle from that time. Almost like a special forces, there are special forces, Navy SEALs, people you wouldn't want to mess with on a battlefield. That was the Goy Tsanko, top 10 warriors of the tribe. These are just things that I know from my upbringing. Growing up in our Kiowa warrior society, it was something that was taught to me by my elders, and I try to carry it on and take care of it. So there are 4 societies still functioning to this day, and that's the Polai, Taimpego, the Kiowa Gord clan, the Ohoma, the War Society, and then the Tokongo, the Kiowa Black Leggings. And our Kiowa people are proud of these, and we try to keep them as best we can. Just some pictures here. We talk about contemporary warriors. That one on the left is the Ohoma. That's the warriors. That's our ceremony they have, and usually it's during the 4th of July, or I'm sorry, it's the last weekend of July when they dance, and they dance in Stecker, Oklahoma, and you see it's hot. It is a hot time to dance, but they're outside and they have their ceremonies that they have each year, and they, I know they have a really nice dance ground down there in Stecker, Oklahoma. The top right picture is a picture of our Polai, our rabbits, doing their ceremony. They usually dance early in the morning before, and it's associated with the Taimpego, the Kiowa Gord clan. They dance early in the morning. That's our children's time. And so they put their ears up and they bounce up and down like a rabbit, and they share stories, they share songs, they share meals, and even have their own rabbit feast a lot of times. So that still goes on around the 4th of July weekend. At the bottom, you have on the bottom right 2 pictures. That's my dad, my 2 nephews, and myself. And our Gord Society regalia. We are members. My dad is still a member of the Taimpego, along with my nephews. They enjoy dancing, and that was just a picture I wanted to kind of share with you all. They're still a part of the Kiowa Gord Society. And to the right bottom, you'll see our Tokongo coming out into our dance arena, and our battle teepee behind it. That's a symbol of our old chief Dohasan. That was how he decorated his teepee. One of our old chiefs in our Kiowa Black Leggings Society. And the red cape came to us from a battle where a Mexican soldier was killed, and the warrior that killed him took that cape as a trophy and brought it back. And in honor of that, that war deed, the members of the society donned that cape and kept it with them. So there's a lot of, ceremonial activity that goes on around Ohoma, Taimpego, and Tokongo, and even Polayo. there's all four societies, they still have their ceremonies and they have their own songs, their own way of dancing, and their own way of relating to one another. So I think it's very important, we have transitioned these old ancient warrior societies, and they're still functional to this day. And we brought all the songs and a lot of the tradition with them. And my tribe, the Kiowa people, they keep them going and they try to take care of them. But we try to take care of them in the best way we can, and don't want it to leave us, meaning we try to, limit, what songs we share or what traditions we share, because we don't want these things to leave us. And I'll kind of talk about that here later on if we got some questions about it. But no, just showing some images of our contemporary warrior societies to this day. I guess I've been talking about 30 minutes, but this is a month that we all celebrate across the nation. We just celebrate, our dedication, our distinction and it's an honor to be a Native warrior to this, in our community. And I know all of our servicemen and women have built that legacy of courage, professionalism, and selfless service that will inspire future generations within our Native nations. So my hope is, you've all learned something about our Native warriors, and they're carrying on that old ancient warrior tradition to this day, using what's available to them, which is the U.S. Armed Services. So I'm very honored, and I thank all of our veterans and their families for the sacrifices that they have made over the years. So it's been a wonderful honor to serve you, and I look forward to conversations following. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Warren, and thank you for your service to the country. One of our first questions, do you have recommended reading for those who want to explore the topic more?
Absolutely. There's really good books out there on the Native, they're Warriors in Uniform. There was a book that came out not too long ago focused on a lot of Native warriors from different Native nations. Dr. Bill Meadows has a good book out on Kiowa, Comanche, and Apache war societies. A lot of those Kiowas have 4 societies still going, and I know the Comanches and Apaches all had war societies too. Those might be some good books to kind of look into if you wanted to dive in more about traditional war societies and contemporary warriors. Those are 2 books that off the top of my head you might start with, but I'm sure they'll lead you into other articles that you can read about. I hope.
And you had talked a bit about, I'm going to combine a couple of questions into one. Do you know why some of the warrior societies are no longer being practiced? And you had also talked about if we had a few minutes to discuss the preservation of the practices. Would you explain that area?
Sure. I'll go into that first part first. I think after being set on a reservation and the allotment of traditional lands on our reservation, 1906, we stopped having our dances, with the exception of one, and that was the Ohoma, the War Dance Society. They kept on dancing in secret. I guess after the allotment period, though, a lot of our societies stopped meeting. Rabbit Society was one of them. Taimpigo and Tokongo, they no longer had their dances. If they did, they were singing, and probably in secret, somebody's barn or house, and they kept those songs going. But I think during that time after the allotment period, people were focused on trying to make it, become farmers or become ranchers, something that was not a part of our Kiowa way. They were being assimilated to be ranchers and farmers, and it was a difficult time in our tribal history. And so I think since they weren't having those ceremonies, they lost the 2 smallest ones, which was the teenagers ones, the Altoi, the sheep, and the Saint Han, the horse headdress society. Those became defunct. because people were not participating in the rabbits, so there was no progression up there. There was no progression up there into these other societies. So I think that led to a gap. A lot of people could remember the rabbit society prior to the allotment period. And so since we were no longer meeting as a community, I think that's why a lot of those societies didn't progress. It wasn't until after World War II, actually, that I think it was 1956, the Kiowa Gourd Clan was revived. And then the following year, the Black Leggings were revived after World War II. And so that was kind of a renaissance of coming out and singing. And it was realized that our songs had made it for these societies, whereas those songs for the Young Sheep and the Horse Headdress Society didn't make it. They no longer knew how to have their ceremonies or their feast. Second part of that question was really focused on our Taimpegaw, our Gourd Society. When we talk about ways in which we protect our ceremonies, it's important that we understand that people should respect our intellectual and cultural property. Here's what happened with the gourd dance. It was shared in the 1970s with non-Indian people and other tribes, and it expanded all across the nation. People were hosting powwows, and there's probably not a powwow in the 48 states that don't have a gourd dance of some kind associated with the powwow in the afternoon. And that came from our Kiowa people. There's a long story and a long oral tradition that goes along with that ceremony. But those songs were shared, the dance was shared. Now everybody does it. And for Kiowas, that's a big part of our identity. There's a lot of families that are tied together through that society and through its songs and its identity. We kind of look at a gourd dance now. We see the way people are doing it, the way people are dressed, and it really is. We ask ourselves, why even do that? That's our dance, and a lot of people they get carried away with it, I guess, and start to do things that are not in line with our Kiowa values or our Kiowa customs. And so they do their own thing. And even tribes are laying claim to our dance, even though all of our songs, they have Kiowa words in them, and they have Kiowa meaning. They mean a lot, and they mean a lot, and they tell a story about our people, our old chiefs, our old warriors, or even our families. There are family songs that people have made for a certain occasion, and so we understand that, and we know what the dance means to us. But a lot of people do it, and they just do it, and they claim it. And our music, a lot of other tribes can sing our songs, but you don't really understand till you go to Kiowa country and you hear the Taimpegaw, the real Taimpegaw. You'll hear that spirit come out of that drum. And that's when you know that's a real gourd dance. So I think a lot of we don't want our other ceremonies, and we've kind of, ever since that happened, we've kind of backtracked and said we don't want to put this out there for people to mimic. And so we try to avoid videoing or setting up, putting certain songs on recording, because we know it'll leave us, and we don't want that for our ceremonies.
Our next question: would you consider water protectors and land defenders contemporary warriors?
Oh, yes.
As many people label them activists, but they wonder about the term when you consider they are not making change, but trying to protect and defend tradition and history.
Absolutely. I think that's a key point. I think there are other ways of being a warrior, not just veterans, but, water activists. I think there's even educational warriors, people who are working in the legal field, attorneys. That's a battleground that is being worked on, this day. And I think I talked about it when we were talking about the sovereignty. medical doctors. There are people, look at the pandemic. We had warriors that were in there providing health care to our different Native communities. So I think that, yeah, this presentation was on contemporary Native warriors. I really focused in on the veteran aspect, but I acknowledge and I agree there are other ways to become a warrior. Maybe not in the manner that Joe Medicine Crow or Nicole Mann have, or myself, but that there are other ways of being a warrior. Not just going out, not just going out there and getting your education and becoming a lawyer, but like talking about our water protectors, our people who are in our communities, grassroots people. We need those people to be out there holding our I guess government, state government, our elected officials accountable to respect our native lands and tradition. So I think those are very, very respected warriors as well.
And then I guess it's an offshoot of being a warrior also. Would you talk about your activity as being a your work as the District 7 legislator?
Yeah, that's for our native communities. Everybody always tells me though it's hard working for your own people. As a warrior, I think you as a legislator, a warrior now, I guess that's what you'd call it. You're held accountable by the people that put you in there to represent them. And they want to see action, and they want to hear what the future of the tribe looks like. And I represent 5,800 people within our tribe. That's over half the tribe. And because not most of our members don't live on the reservation because they've moved out for jobs and education. And so I have to represent them and find out what they want, what their needs may be, because they're different from people living in Southwest Oklahoma. And so we've got to really, for me, my battles are with my people, helping them to understand and creating transparency and working to implement change, just like our water protectors and our people working in education and law and healthcare. All of those warriors, the same way, we're trying to make things happen and take action and implement change. But a lot of times change is not easy. And so I depend on my ceremonies a lot. I depend on Native American church, and I depend a lot on prayer, and not so much on, it's kind of like when I work with my people, I try not to bring what I've learned in the military into that traditional indigenous community, because I don't think it's applicable. I think a lot of those, I think we already know what it is to be a warrior, and we don't have to, and even a leader, and it's different for us. So I try not to bring my own military training into what I do as a legislator. I keep them separate because they're incompatible in a lot of ways. We think of Western ideas of leadership. It's all about individualism, individualism and success and progression. Whereas our tribal ideas of how to be a leader is focused more on protection of the health and well-being of your community. And it's more about the community being successful versus you getting promoted. So I try to keep that in my mind when I'm doing my work as a legislator, and it's tough sometimes, but that's the battle I'm waging, is trying to focus on the community, meeting their needs. And, I'm just one person representing 5,800 people. How do I even understand those needs? So it takes a lot of communication, a lot of prayer, and a lot of discernment on what my plan is moving forward.
And we've had many comments thanking you for such an informative presentation. One in particular from a person whom I think you are acquainted, Dr. Patricia Gilman.
Mhm.
And she says, great talk, Warren. I learned a lot. Thanks for doing this. And it was great to see you.
Mm. Thank you, Dr. Gilman. We miss you here in Oklahoma, and it was great thank you for the comment.
What are some of the current threats to the sovereignty of Native American nations?
Well, we had the McGirt case. I think that's the major threat. We had a decision that, here in Oklahoma, it basically said that our reservations for the eastern part of Oklahoma, primarily Creek Nation, that their reservation was not disestablished by Congress. And so they retain jurisdiction of their reservation. Then we have this new case. They have this new case come up, and I think they're working on, I think that the Supreme Court, what scares me is we've kind of had this roller coaster of sovereignty. And I think with that case, we have now the Castro case where they're looking at, what's going to happen next. We're going to wait for the other shoe to drop. Hopefully, they won't try to disestablish our sovereignty or do away with our rights as Native people. But I think, thinking about Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court, he wants to reevaluate that. And it's kind of like another battle we're fighting. How do we focus this support? Each tribe is trying to figure out. We don't have a plan for it right now. The Supreme Court was to say that there was that Native nations have no sovereign rights as a people. That does away with a lot of things for our smaller tribes. I think all tribes would be affected because we would lose a lot of resources from the federal government, but also tribal gaming. The impacts would be disastrous to our communities. For a lot, my tribe included, if we were to lose our sovereign rights as a Native nation, I think a lot of our people would pass away because they are not only dependent, but we need those resources to manage our land and our homes. And I'm just very, very fearful that one of these days the Supreme Court's going to make a ruling, because the federal government has plenary power, as much as we don't like it. We want to be sovereign nations, but they do have plenary power over us, and they can get rid of us with a stroke of a pen. And we got to have a plan as Native nations to defend that. We need allies and a plan to start getting ahead of this, I guess, if that makes any sense. I'm still kind of reading up and trying to go through the Castro law and kind of understand it myself. So more to follow on that.
That was very well said. Warren, thank you so much for a very informative program today. We appreciate your time.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I want to just say blessings to you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I appreciate the invite. And I say, hey, I will see you all again. Thank you.
And we hope to see all of you again November 5th for our next Amerind online program. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.